From a director who was terrified he'd knocked out Rutger Hauer's teeth during a stunt to a 190-page screenplay that was deemed too gruesome for Hollywood, the making of The Hitcher is nearly as twisted as the film itself. Critics gave it 0 stars, rock legends inspired the villain's look, and the weather cooperated with eerie perfection on the exact days they needed it. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about The Hitcher. Fact 1. Inspired by the Doors song. The entire concept for The Hitcher came to writer Eric Red during a long, solitary drive across the American desert, and it all started with a song playing on his car radio. Red was 20 years old and had just made a short film called Gunman's Blues, hoping it would launch his directing career. But when no offers came in, he decided to leave New York City and head to Austin, Texas. He took what's called a drive-away car, which meant he was delivering someone else's vehicle cross-country, giving him plenty of time alone on empty highways to think about his future and listen to music. During one of these long stretches of road, the Doors song "Riders on the Storm" came on, and something about it immediately grabbed his attention. The song's lyrics describe a killer on the road whose brain is squirming like a toad, warning listeners that if they give this man a ride, sweet memory will die. Red found himself captivated by the dark imagery and the cinematic quality of the music itself, which felt moody and atmospheric, perfectly matching the desolate landscapes he was driving through. He later said that the elements of the song, specifically a killer on the road in a storm plus the cinematic feel of the music, I would make a terrific opening for a film. The connection between the song and the movie became even more obvious in the final product. The Hitcher opens on a stormy night with rain pouring down as Jim Halsey drives through the Texas desert, and when he spots the mysterious hitchhiker standing by the roadside, thunder cracks overhead at the exact moment John Ryder extends his thumb. Even the character's name, John Ryder, is a direct nod to the Riders on the Storm mentioned in the song. Red spent 7 months in Austin driving a taxicab while he wrote the screenplay, and throughout that entire time, the haunting melody and sinister warnings from that Doors song continued to shape his vision for what would become one of the most intense thrillers of the 1980s. A fact too, the original script was 3 hours long. When Eric Red first submitted his screenplay for The Hitcher to Hollywood producers in 1983, he sent them a script that was approximately 190 pages long, which in traditional screenwriting terms meant the film could have run close to 3 hours if every page had been filmed exactly as written. Script development executive David Bombig, who was one of the first people in Hollywood to read Red's massive screenplay, later recalled that he kept avoiding it at first because of its intimidating length. But when he finally picked it up and started reading, he was completely blown away by what he found on those pages. The original version of The Hitcher was far more brutal and graphic than the film that eventually made it to theaters, and filled with scenes of violence and horror that would have pushed the boundaries of what audiences could stomach even in the anything-goes atmosphere of 1980s horror cinema. Among the scenes that were written but never filmed was a sequence showing John Ryder slaughtering an entire family in their station wagon, leaving no survivors and creating a level of carnage that the filmmakers ultimately decided was too much even for this dark thriller. The script also included a truly disturbing moment where an eyeball would appear in a hamburger that Jim orders at a diner, though this grotesque discovery was eventually changed to a severed finger appearing in a plate of French fries in the final film, which was still shocking but slightly less graphic than the original concept. There was also a graphic sex scene between Jim and a character named Gal Galveston, who was a female character in early drafts that came before the Nash character played by Jennifer Jason Leigh in the finished movie, and this intimate scene was completely cut from the script during rewrites. Additionally, the original screenplay included a character being decapitated, along with numerous other moments of extreme violence and gore that were either toned down significantly or removed entirely as producers, and the director worked with Eric Red over 6 months of rewrites to create a version of the story that could actually be made into a film that studios would agree to finance and audiences might actually want to see. Fact 3. John Ryder was based on Keith Richards. When writer Eric Red sat down to create the terrifying hitchhiker John Ryder, and he had a very specific image in mind: the legendary Rolling Stones guitarist Keith Richards. Red later revealed to Rutger Hauer that Richards's distinctive skeletal appearance and rock and roll intensity served as the visual and emotional blueprint for the character. This wasn't just about copying someone's looks, but about capturing a certain dangerous, unpredictable energy that Richards embodied both on stage and off. In the early 1980s, Richards had cultivated a reputation as one of rock's most iconic survivors, someone who seemed to exist outside normal human limitations, and Red wanted that same quality of seeming almost supernatural for his villain. The original script actually described John Ryder as extremely thin and gaunt, almost skeletal in nature, which is why early casting discussions included other lean, angular actors like David Bowie, Sting, and Terence Stamp before Rutger Hauer was ultimately chosen for the role. Interestingly, Red also originally envisioned the character speaking through an electronic voice box, imagining Ryder as having a damaged larynx, which would have made him even more unsettling and inhuman. However, director Robert Harmon objected to this approach, wanting to make the character more complex and human rather than simply a monster, and the voice box idea was dropped during rewrites. While Rutger Hauer didn't physically resemble Keith Richards the way the script originally intended, he brought his own interpretation to the role that made John Ryder one of cinema's most memorable villains, creating a character who felt both terrifyingly real and almost mythically evil at the same time. Fact 4. Sam Elliott was too scary to cast. When it came time to cast the role of John Ryder, the filmmakers knew they needed someone who could be genuinely terrifying, and one of the actors they considered was Sam Elliott, who would later become famous for his roles in westerns and action films. According to Rutger Hauer's book All Those Moments, executive producer Edward S. Feldman had actually settled on Elliott for the part after his audition, and the reason was both impressive and deeply unsettling. Elliott came in to read for the role and delivered such an intensely frightening performance that Feldman was genuinely shaken by what he had witnessed. Hauer mentions in his book that Elliott was apparently so scary during his audition that Feldman was literally afraid to go out to his car in the parking lot afterward, which says a lot about how convincing and menacing Elliott must have been in that room. The fact that a seasoned Hollywood producer who had worked on countless films could be left feeling physically intimidated by an audition speaks to just how powerful Elliott's interpretation of the character must have been. However, despite Feldman wanting to move forward with Elliott in the role, things didn't work out as planned because Elliott had a scheduling conflict that prevented him from accepting the part. This meant the filmmakers had to look elsewhere for their villain, and they eventually found Rutger Hauer, who brought his own unique intensity to the character. It's fascinating to think about how different the Hitcher might have been with Sam Elliott in the lead villain role instead of Hauer, and especially considering that both actors have such distinctive screen presences. The story also reveals just how seriously the production team took the casting process, knowing that the entire film would live or die based on whether audiences believed in the threat posed by John Ryder. Fact 5. The weather cooperated perfectly. Making a movie in the desert can be unpredictable, especially when your opening scene absolutely requires a rainstorm, and your entire film depends on capturing the right atmospheric conditions at just the right moments. Director Robert Harmon and his crew were filming The Hitcher across various locations in California and Nevada over a 9-week shooting schedule in early 1985, and they knew they needed very specific weather for certain scenes to work properly. The film opens with one of its most iconic images: John Ryder standing in the pouring rain on a deserted highway, his thumb out, waiting for his next victim. And this shot simply couldn't be filmed without actual rain to create the ominous, foreboding atmosphere that sets the entire tone for what follows. The production team looked at their shooting schedule and marked exactly one day when they absolutely needed rain to fall. And against all odds, on that precise day, the skies opened up and delivered exactly what they needed. But the meteorological luck didn't stop there, because later in the production schedule, the filmmakers needed stormy weather for another crucial sequence. And once again, nature cooperated perfectly, providing the dramatic storm conditions on the exact day they had scheduled to shoot those scenes. This kind of weather timing is almost unheard of in film production, where crews typically have to either wait days or weeks for the right conditions, use expensive rain machines and special effects to fake weather, or completely reschedule shoots at great cost and inconvenience. The crew considered themselves incredibly fortunate, almost supernaturally so, that the desert weather aligned so precisely with their shooting schedule. In an industry where weather delays can cost productions thousands of dollars per day, and where filmmakers often have to compromise their vision due to uncooperative conditions, the Hitcher enjoyed what some might call a stroke of pure luck, allowing Harmon to capture the exact moody, threatening atmosphere he envisioned without any artificial manipulation or costly delays. Our Fact 6, Rutger Hauer knocked out his own tooth. Rutger Hauer was known for doing many of his own stunts throughout The Hitcher, which impressed both the crew and the professional stunt drivers on set, but one particular stunt went wrong in a painful way that nobody expected. During the filming of the final windshield sequence near the end of the movie, Hauer was performing a dangerous stunt that involved him holding a shotgun while positioned near or on the windshield of a moving vehicle. In the middle of executing this complex and physically demanding stunt, the shotgun he was gripping accidentally struck him in the face with enough force to knock out one of his teeth. Despite the sudden injury and what must have been considerable pain, Hauer continued working like the consummate professional he was, and the production didn't have to shut down or delay filming because of the accident. The fact that Hauer insisted on doing so much of his own stunt work, including the dangerous driving sequences that amazed even the trained stunt professionals, shows just how committed he was to making John Ryder feel as authentic and physically present as possible. This wasn't just an actor going through the motions in front of a green screen or letting a double handle the difficult moments. Hauer was right there in the thick of it, taking real risks and occasionally paying a real physical price for his dedication to the craft. The incident with the tooth became one of those legendary behind-the-scenes stories that the cast and crew would remember long after the film wrapped, serving as a testament to Hauer's intense approach to his work and his willingness to push himself to the limit for a role. It's the kind of detail that makes you watch his performance differently, knowing that the danger and intensity you see on screen wasn't just acting, but came from an actor who was truly putting everything on the line. Fact 7. C. Thomas Howell was actually afraid of Hauer. Thomas Howell wasn't just acting when he looked terrified on screen in The Hitcher, he was genuinely scared of his co-star Rutger Hauer throughout the entire production. Howell later admitted that Hauer's intensity both on camera and behind the scenes left him in a constant state of fear, almost as if he really was Jim Halsey being stalked by the real John Ryder. This wasn't because Hauer was unkind or unprofessional, but rather because the Dutch actor fully committed to his role in a way that blurred the lines between performance and reality. Hauer had a reputation for staying in character during filming, and The Hitcher was no exception. According to reports from the set, Hauer remained menacing and intimidating even when the cameras weren't rolling, creating an atmosphere of genuine unease among the cast and crew. People on set gave him a wide berth, unsure when the actor ended and the psychopathic hitchhiker began. For Howell, who was only 20 years old at the time and still relatively early in his career, this made every day on set an exercise in managing real anxiety. What makes this even more remarkable is that Howell didn't realize just how much Hauer's method was affecting him until later. He thought he was simply doing his job and responding to good acting, but he eventually understood that his fear was authentic and visceral. In interviews, Howell has said that working with Hauer felt like being trapped with someone genuinely dangerous, which is exactly the dynamic the film needed to succeed. The tension between them wasn't manufactured through multiple takes or director's notes. It was already there, simmering under every scene they shared together. This real-world fear translated into one of the most believable performances of terror in 1980s cinema. When you watch Jim Halsey's wide-eyed panic and desperate attempts to escape John Ryder, you're watching an actor who is actually intimidated by his scene partner. It's a testament to both Hauer's commitment to his craft and Howell's ability to channel genuine emotion into his performance. Fact 8. David Bowie and Sting were considered. When screenwriter Eric Red first wrote The Hitcher, he described the villain John Ryder in very specific physical terms that would dramatically shape the early casting process. In the original script, Ryder was written as an almost skeletal figure, someone who looked gaunt and unnervingly thin, which immediately narrowed down the type of actor the filmmakers would be looking for. This skeletal description led director Robert Harmon and the producers to compile a wish list of actors who naturally possessed that lean, angular look that could bring an otherworldly menace to the character. And the casting discussions became particularly interesting because they extended beyond traditional Hollywood actors and ventured into the world of rock music. Both David Bowie and Sting, two of the biggest rock stars of the 1980s, were mentioned as potential candidates for the role of John Ryder. These weren't just random suggestions either, as both musicians had that distinctive, thin, angular appearance that matched Red's original vision, and both had already dabbled in acting by that point in their careers. Bowie had appeared in films like The Man Who Fell to Earth and was known for his chameleon-like ability to inhabit strange characters, while Sting had recently made his film debut and possessed an intense, penetrating stare that could certainly convey menace. Beyond the rock stars, the list also included some highly respected character actors who fit the skeletal description. Terence Stamp was actually director Robert Harmon's personal first choice for the role, and Harmon was so committed to this idea that he reportedly carried around a photograph of Stamp to show at pitch meetings, trying to convince everyone that Stamp was perfect for John Ryder. Other actors considered included Sam Shepard, who had the rugged, weathered look that could work, and Harry Dean Stanton, whose naturally lean frame and ability to play unsettling characters made him an obvious contender. Stamp received a copy of the script, but ultimately turned down the role, and the other skeletal candidates either weren't available or didn't work out for various reasons. In the end, the filmmakers decided to abandon the specific physical description and focus instead on finding an actor who could deliver the psychological intensity the role demanded, which is how they landed on Rutger Hauer. Fact 9. Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel. Both gave 0 stars. When The Hitcher was released in February of 1986, it faced one of the harshest critical receptions imaginable from two of the most influential film critics in America. Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, the famous duo who hosted their popular movie review show together, both awarded the film 0 stars out of 4, which was an extremely rare occurrence that they reserved only for films they considered truly objectionable. Ebert didn't just dislike The Hitcher, he was deeply offended by it. Writing in his review that the movie was diseased and corrupt and questioning the morals of everyone involved in making it. The criticism became even more public when Ebert and Siskel appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson to discuss movies they found particularly troubling. During the conversation, Johnny Carson asked them whether they opposed censorship, given their strong negative reactions to violent films like The Hitcher. Ebert's response became infamous among film fans. He said, of course, he wasn't in favor of censorship, but then added his now legendary quote about The Hitcher: "The film should be made, it should be shown, and it should not be attended by anybody." It was a cutting way of saying that while he believed in free speech and artistic expression, he thought the movie was so morally bankrupt that audiences should simply choose to avoid it entirely. Siskel was equally harsh, calling The Hitcher a nauseating thriller and describing it as a thinly veiled but more gruesome ripoff of Steven Spielberg's Duel. He insisted there was no meaning behind the film's violence and dismissed it as nothing more than a disgusting, meaningless shocker. Both critics seemed particularly disturbed by the lack of motivation given to Rutger Hauer's villainous character and by the film's relentless cruelty. What makes this story even more interesting is that despite these scathing reviews from two of the most powerful voices in film criticism, The Hitcher eventually found its audience through home video and has since been reappraised as a cult classic that many contemporary critics and filmmakers now praise. Fact 10. The infamous death scene was never actually shown. One of the most notorious moments in The Hitcher happens near the end of the film when Jennifer Jason Leigh's character Nash is tied between two semi-trucks by the psychotic John Ryder. And here's the strange part. Audiences never actually see what happens to her, yet the scene has become infamous for its extreme violence. The setup is designed to be as unbearable as possible, with Nash chained between the two massive vehicles and Ryder sitting in the driver's seat of one truck with his foot on the clutch, threatening to tear her apart if Jim doesn't shoot him. The police surround the scene but can't take action because any sudden movement might cause Ryder to release the clutch and kill Nash instantly. When Jim refuses to shoot Ryder, the hitchhiker becomes disappointed and hits the gas pedal, and at that exact moment the camera cuts away from Nash entirely. Instead of showing the actual death, director Robert Harmon chose to focus only on Nash's hands being pulled tight and her screaming before the screen fades to black, leaving the horrific outcome entirely to the viewer's imagination. This creative decision was incredibly effective because critics and moviegoers have consistently described the scene as one of the goriest and most disturbing deaths in 1980s horror cinema, even though they never witnessed it happen on screen. Our Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel both condemned the film for its sadistic violence, with Siskel specifically criticizing this moment in his review, yet he essentially misrepresented what audiences actually see because the death itself is never depicted. The filmmakers had fought hard to keep this scene in the movie at all, as multiple studios and HBO executives wanted it removed or softened during production, with some suggesting they show a funeral instead of the death itself. The irony is that by choosing not to show the graphic violence and instead letting audiences imagine the worst possible outcome, Harmon created something far more powerful and disturbing than any special effects could have achieved, proving that sometimes what you don't show is more terrifying than what you do. The Fact 11. HBO initially refused to make the film. Getting The Hitcher made turned out to be almost as difficult as surviving an encounter with John Ryder himself, and it all came down to one powerful executive who absolutely did not want this movie to exist. When the screenplay for The Hitcher was making the rounds in Hollywood back in 1983 and 1984, it had developed a reputation as an extremely violent and disturbing script that most studios wanted nothing to do with, but independent producer Donna Dubrow saw something different in the material when she heard about it while working on another film. She thought the concept sounded like what she described as Duel with a Person, referring to Steven Spielberg's classic thriller. And when she moved to a new position at Silver Screen Partners and Home Box Office, she immediately contacted producer Edward Feldman, who she had worked for previously, and asked him to send her a copy of the script. After reading it, Dubrow submitted the screenplay to her boss, HBO Senior Vice President Maurice Singer, who liked what he read and sent it along to New York to be reviewed by Michael Fuchs, who was the HBO chairman and chief operating officer at the time. The problem was that Fuchs had the final say on whether the film would get made, and this was definitely not the kind of material he enjoyed or wanted to produce, so initially he refused to greenlight the project. However, fate intervened when Dubrow had to travel back to New York on other business. And during that trip, she managed to arrange a meeting with Fuchs where she pitched The Hitcher not as a gory exploitation film, but as a Hitchcockian thriller, emphasizing the suspense and psychological tension rather than the violence. Her pitch worked, and when Dubrow returned to Los Angeles, Singer informed her that Fuchs had agreed to make the film, but there was a major catch that would shape the entire production. Fuchs gave his approval with two non-negotiable conditions. The infamous scene where the girl gets torn apart between two trucks had to be toned down, and the overall level of violence throughout the film needed to be significantly reduced from what was written in Eric Red's original screenplay. Fact 12. The villain wears 2 wedding rings. If you watch The Hitcher closely, you'll notice something disturbing about John Ryder that the film never explicitly explains, but adds another layer of menace to his character. Throughout the movie, Rutger Hauer's terrifying hitchhiker wears 2 wedding rings on a single finger, and this small detail tells a chilling story all on its own without a single word of dialogue being needed to explain it. The rings aren't just a random costume choice or an oversight by the wardrobe department. Many fans and film analysts have theorized that these 2 wedding rings are trophies that Ryder collected from a married couple he murdered before the events of the film even begin. This dark detail fits perfectly with the character's methodical brutality and his tendency to take souvenirs from his victims, which we see play out in one of the movie's most infamous scenes. The connection becomes even more sinister when you consider the notorious diner scene where Jim Halsey discovers a severed human finger hidden in his plate of French fries. The implication here is genuinely disturbing because it suggests that Ryder didn't just kill this married couple for their rings, but he also kept other parts of his victims as grotesque keepsakes or tools for psychological torture. The finger he slips into Jim's food could very well have belonged to one of the people whose wedding rings he now wears as a constant reminder of his crimes. This kind of subtle visual storytelling is part of what makes The Hitcher so effective as a psychological thriller. Director Robert Harmon and writer Eric Red didn't feel the need to spell out every detail of Ryder's past or explain his motivations through exposition. Instead, they let small visual clues like the two wedding rings tell their own horrifying story, allowing audiences to piece together the nightmare on their own. The rings serve as a quiet but constant reminder that Jim Halsey isn't John Ryder's first victim. And based on those two bands of gold sitting on one finger, we know that Ryder's killing spree has already destroyed at least one couple's life together before the movie even starts. Fact 13. Filmed at the iconic Roy's Cafe on Route 66. One of the most visually striking locations in The Hitcher is the legendary Roy's Motel and Cafe in Amboy, California, a real-life Route 66 landmark that has become synonymous with the golden age of American road trips. This isn't just any random diner that the production crew dressed up for the film. Roy's is an authentic piece of Americana that has been standing in the Mojave Desert since 1938, when Roy Crowell first opened it as a gas and service station along what was then called the Main Street of America. By the time The Hitcher filmed there in 1985, Roy's had already lived through Route 66's boom years and its decline after Interstate 40 opened in 1972 and diverted traffic away from the old highway. The iconic neon sign with its bold colors and distinctive arrow design made Roy's instantly recognizable, and director Robert Harmon knew it would provide the perfect desolate, end-of-the-world atmosphere that the film needed. The location appears in several key scenes, including moments where Jim Halsey stops at what looks like civilization, only to find himself still trapped in the nightmare created by John Ryder. What makes this location even more interesting is that Roy's has appeared in numerous other films and music videos over the decades, cementing its status as one of the most filmed locations on Route 66. Brad Pitt had a terrorizing scene there in the 1993 thriller California, and pop star Enrique Iglesias used the location for his Hero music video in 2001. The building has also been featured in horror films like Southbound and has appeared in countless commercials and television shows. Today, Roy's stands as a ghost town and a testament to Route 66's faded glory. But film buffs and road trippers still make pilgrimages to see the spot where Rutger Hauer's chilling hitchhiker stalked his prey across the desert highways. The building remains largely unchanged from how it appeared in The Hitcher, with its weathered facade and vintage signage still intact, allowing visitors to step into the same eerie landscape that made the film so memorably unsettling. Fact 14. Jennifer Jason Leigh reunited with Rutger Hauer. When Jennifer Jason Leigh signed on to play Nash in The Hitcher, it wasn't just another job for the young actress who was still in the early stages of her career. She had a very specific reason for wanting to be part of this brutal thriller, and that reason was Rutger Hauer himself. Just 1 year before The Hitcher hit theaters in 1986, Leigh and Hauer had worked together on another intense film called Flesh and Blood, a medieval adventure drama directed by Paul Verhoeven that was released in 1985. That earlier collaboration had clearly left a strong impression on Leigh, who was eager to share the screen with the Dutch actor once again, despite the fact that her role in The Hitcher would be relatively small compared to his commanding presence as the film's villain. In interviews about the project, Leigh made it clear that the opportunity to work with Hauer again was a major factor in her decision to take the role of Nash, the truck stop waitress who befriends the terrorized Jim Halsey and ultimately meets a horrific fate. She also mentioned that she loved the character of Nash because there was a real person there, meaning the role had depth and wasn't just a throwaway part in a horror thriller. The chemistry and trust that Lee and Hauer had built while filming Flesh and Blood the previous year likely made the intense and disturbing scenes they had to film together in The Hitcher somewhat easier to navigate, even though the tone of this film was completely different from their first collaboration. By the time The Hitcher came around, Hauer was becoming known for playing dark and complex characters, having already made his mark with Blade Runner in 1982, and Lee was building her own reputation as a fearless actress willing to take on challenging roles. Their reunion in The Hitcher would become one of the film's most memorable elements, particularly the shocking scene where Nash is tied between two trucks. And even though Lee's screen time was limited compared to the two male leads. Fact 15. Christopher Nolan called it a guilty pleasure. Decades after The Hitcher first terrified audiences in 1986, one of Hollywood's most acclaimed directors publicly declared his love for this cult classic thriller. Christopher Nolan, the Oscar-winning filmmaker behind masterpieces like Inception, The Dark Knight trilogy, and Oppenheimer, cited The Hitcher as one of his favorite guilty pleasure films, proving that even the most sophisticated directors appreciate a good white-knuckle ride through the desert. In 2024, Nolan made headlines when he spoke openly about his admiration for the film, describing it with both nostalgia and critical appreciation. And he recalled watching it as a teenager and admitted that he never questioned the logic of this 80s chiller at the time, though looking back now, he finds the plot to be mind-bendingly arbitrary in many ways. Despite this admission, Nolan's love for the film has only grown stronger over the years, particularly because of one element that stands above everything else in the movie. What really captured Nolan's attention was Rutger Hauer's performance as the mysterious and terrifying John Ryder. Nolan specifically praised Hauer's work in The Hitcher as his finest and most influential Europsycho performance this side of Blade Runner, which is significant praise considering Hauer's iconic role as the replicant Roy Batty in that science fiction classic. For Nolan to place The Hitcher's villain on the same level as one of cinema's most memorable performances speaks volumes about how deeply the film impacted him as both a viewer and a filmmaker. Nolan's public endorsement helped introduce The Hitcher to a new generation of film fans who might have otherwise overlooked this 1980s thriller. His willingness to champion a film that critics initially despised demonstrates that great directors can find value and inspiration in movies that don't fit the traditional mold of award-winning cinema. The fact that Nolan sees no shame in calling it a guilty pleasure only adds to the film's cult status and proves that sometimes the movies that stay with us the longest are the ones that simply scared us senseless when we were young.